All right, now let's try playing a guitar solo over that previous chord progression using the G major pentatonic scale. And I'm going to add a note or two to the scale to make closer reference to the chords as they go by, and then I'll explain that to you. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and... All right, through this solo, what I tried to do was accent the chord tones for each chord. So in G, I emphasized G notes and B notes and D notes, the root, third, and fifth of the G chord. Over C, I did the same thing. I emphasized the root, C, an E note, and a G note. And then over D, I travel outside the scale a little bit because I'm incorporating an F sharp, which is the major third of D. So what ends up happening is the solo kind of makes more of a reference to a G major scale, but it's good to just think major pentatonic in terms of the melodies that you play. So that's basically what I'm doing. So you can see emphasizing the chord tones for each chord as it goes by, and then try to create an interesting melody at the same time. All right, now let's look at another fingering, an extended position for G major pentatonic, so you can solo over the entire fretboard. And as I'm soloing using this position, one more time, when I'm over C and I'm over D, I'm going to try to utilize those chord tones for C and for D. So over C, and over D, one, 2, 3, and... So there's an infinite number of choices that you can make when you're playing over a chord progression like that that's that simple. You could just stick with major pentatonic, or as I was doing, try to make reference to each chord so that your solo has more melody and it's more intrinsically tied with the chords as they go by. Now, as I mentioned before, you can build a chord from each note in a major scale, and it's an important thing to understand. It doesn't just apply to acoustic guitar in rock. It applies to just the structure of music, but it's an essential element in understanding music, and it'll help us, especially in terms of understanding the chord progressions that you might play or the chord progressions that you hear that are played on acoustic guitar in so much rock music and pop music. So let's look at our G major scale, and we're going to build a chord from each note in the scale. Okay, here's a G major scale, played in second position using all fretted notes. You have root, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, or the root, and then it repeats, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. So if we build a chord from each one of those notes, we know our first chord is a G major chord. That's our one chord. The two chord would be built from the second scale degree, which is an A, and that's A minor. Third scale degree is B, that's B minor. Fourth scale degree is C, that chord is C. Fifth scale degree is a D, so the 5 chord, as we said before, that's a D chord. The sixth scale degree is an E, that makes E minor. And the seventh scale degree is F sharp, and then we have the less commonly used F sharp minor 7 flat 5, which I'm showing you as a seventh chord just because it makes more sense. All the other chords, every tone in the chord comes straight out of G major, so that's how we end up with the one chord being a major chord, 2 is minor, A minor, 3 is minor, B minor, 4 is major, 5 is major, 6 is minor, 7 is minor, flat 5 or minor 7 flat 5. All right, now I'm going to show you a commonly used chord progression that utilizes all these different chords, and you can see it makes the progression sound that much more interesting. And again, don't forget, the right hand propels the beat, and that can't stop. And you're going to hear this kind of stuff in the Rolling Stones songs like Wild Horses, and you hear it in all kinds of different country rock and straight rock music and popular music as well. So it's important to get accustomed to switching from those different chords, but not only that, to be aware of what chords go with the key of G, and then you can transfer that to different keys. Or you can take these chords in this key and try switching them around and listen to how it sounds a little different if you go from G to A minor, or from B minor to G, C to E minor, all the different variations you can make utilizing the same group of chords. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, and... I used a technique while playing this progression to make the chords sound a little bit more interesting. By coming off one of the fretting fingers, so the finger's on, like on the C chord, the middle finger, I take it off to get the sound of a suspended chord. We're going to get more into suspended chords in a minute. So there on the D chord, took my middle finger off the high E string. Same thing on the C here, opening up that D string. And like there, you could go from E and then move up the A string to set up the C chord. And then play little figures in between the chords just to make the progression sound a little bit more interesting. All right, now I'm going to play a guitar solo over that chord progression, and still keeping as an overall framework the G major pentatonic, but trying to hit the chord tones for each one of those chords. As we've introduced some different chords, we've introduced an A minor, and we introduced E minor to it. Very simply, I'm going to emphasize an A note or a chord tone of A minor over the A minor chord, and the same thing with E minor. Emphasize the chord tones of E minor. A would be A, C, and E, A minor, and E minor would be E, G, and B. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and... Now that we have some basic strumming patterns together and I've shown you some elements of soloing, I'm going to introduce another element that's essential to playing acoustic guitar, and that is the use of a capo. What is a capo? I will show you. This is a capo. The capo affixes to the neck of the guitar, and basically it creates a new starting point for the strings wherever you put the capo, at which fret. That functions as the nut and shortens the length of the string. That way, one of the most basic uses of it, or the function of the capo, is that you can put it on the neck of the guitar, and then you could play first position chords, just like we had been doing, but the chords will now sound in a new key further up the neck. But all the chord positions and the fingering stay exactly the same. So this is a way to change keys, and the use of capos in acoustic guitar parts is something you're going to hear in Creedence Clearwater Revival, in the Beatles, in the Stones, Tom Petty, Sheryl Crow, Bob Dylan, James Taylor. I mean, it's an essential part of playing the acoustic guitar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the capo at the 3rd fret. And now, if I play a G chord, I can play our same chord voicing, but it's actually going to sound a concert pitch B flat, because that's a B flat. Likewise, with all the chords in our progression. Now, guitar players always still think of the chord names as their first position cowboy chord names. A guitar player wouldn't say, I'm playing a B flat. This would be called a G, and you think of the capo as the nut and the beginning point. And generally, when this is written down in music, the capo becomes the starting point. So a note that's played open is open, not 3rd fret. That would be notated as the 1st fret, not the 4th fret, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, because it's relative to the capo being 0. So I'm going to play that chord progression one more time, but now up capoed in 3rd position. It's going to be in the key of B flat, and then we're going to solo over that. And one thing to keep in mind is when you listen to the timbre of the instrument, it really creates a lighter, sweeter sound the higher up the capo goes as the strings get shorter. And when you really get up there high, like say 7th fret, as George Harrison did on Here Comes the Sun, the guitar almost started sounding like a mandolin. So here we go. Here's that chord progression we just played, but we're capoed at the 3rd fret. 1, 2, 3, and... All right, now let's try soloing over this. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to play what essentially is the same thing as G major pentatonic, although now with the capo it's really B flat. So it's a little bit confusing to keep your reference points together, but I'm going to solo thinking major pentatonic but making reference to each chord as it goes by. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and... Before moving on to our next section, I'd like to add one more thing about these first position chords. When you're playing either in the key of G or in the key of D or C, but generally speaking, it would either be the key of G or the key of D. There's a common practice that's really easy to do and it sounds good. And what that is when playing all of the chords in this progression, you keep your ring finger and your pinky on the top two strings. And then you just change the lower note. And you can make other slight changes, but basically keeping the top of the chord the same. And you're going to hear this kind of thing in Good Riddance by Green Day, and you also hear this in More Than Words by Extreme. The chords I'm going to use in this example are G5, a C, sus2, D sus4, E minor, and that's it. So through this whole example, these two fingers stay in the same position. 1, 2, 3, and... Okay, this next example uses the same concept. The only thing is when we get to the A minor 7th chord, I'm going to move the note back on the B string off of that 3rd fret down to the 1st fret. And this kind of thing you're going to hear not only in songs like More Than Words, but John Lennon's Woman comes to mind too. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and... So I'm strumming with my fingers now, but I'm adding a dead string hit on beats 2 and 4 by strumming across the strings and then stopping the strings with my palm. And this is a real nice way to add percussiveness and drive to the rhythm part.